We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Vav Amud Aleph in Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 56a. And the previous Amud Rav Yehuda said that Shmuel said a person is only liable for entering the Harabayas, for entering the Azara in a state of Tumah, in an area of Orech Mea Ushmonim Vesheva, the area that's the length of 187 amos, Al Rochav Mea Ushloshim V'chamesh, by a width of 135 amos. And the point over here is that the entire area of the Azara, that's where a person is liable for entering when he is Tameh. Rashi explains, the point over here is, it's the entering into the Azara, but not if you enter into the chambers that are built outside of the Azara. That's what these dimensions represent. Upsuchos l'soch, when those chambers, they opened up into the Azara. Shalom eskadshu b'kedushas Azara. The point over here is that they didn't have the kedushas Azara, b'shiyari mincho, v'shir shal begoyim, u'uvu urim v'tumim, shemekachin bohenas Azara, through again the whole process in terms of the way they sanctified and consecrated the Azara, uvali chasavim, and walking around it, kidam rinan b'shvuas, like we say in Shvuas. And so again, that's the area. The Azara is the area where the person is liable for entering when he's tameh. And the Gemara continues, Tani Tana Kami de Rav Nachman. A Tana taught before Rav Nachman, that's an Amora who teaches Brises. He taught before Rav Nachman the following: Kol ha'azara haisa kuf pei zayin al rochav kuf lamed hey. The entire Azara was 187 by a width of 135. Amar Lei said to him, Hachi Amar Li Abba, this is what Abba said to me, Kagon Zeh, Kohanim Nichnasan L'Sham. For example, this area, that's where the Kohanim can enter there. V'yochlin Sham Kachei Kachim, and that's the area where they can eat Kachei Kachim. The idea is that Kachei Kachim are eaten specifically in the Azara. V'shochlin Sham Kachim Kalim, and that's the area where we slaughter Kachim Kalim. Again, Kachim Kalim are slaughtered in the entire Azara, as opposed to Kachei Kachim, which are slaughtered in the north area. V'chayavin Misham Tam, and that's the area where there's a liability of Tumah. Again, that entire area of the Azara. Lamutei Mai, and the Gemara says, well, what does that exclude? If we're saying, again, this area of 187 by 135, what is that coming to exclude? Ileima lamutei chalonos dalsos v'ove achom. If you say that it's to exclude the windows, the doors, the thickness of the wall, so the Gemara says Tanina, so that we already learned. It says hachalonos v'ove hachomo kilifnim. It says the windows and the thickness of the wall, that's like inside. And so therefore it would seem to be that that's not even excluded, that actually is considered to be part of the Azara. V'yala lamute lishkos, and so the Gemara says rather it must be that we're coming to exclude the lishkos, we're coming to exclude the chambers. But the Gemara still continues and asks, V'i benuyos bachol psuchos lakodesh, but if those chambers are built in the mundane area outside of the Azara, but they open up into the holy area, into the Azara, so v'hatanan, but we learned in a Mishnah, tochon kodesh, that they actually are considered, if they're psuchos lakodesh, tochon kodesh, the inside is considered to be kodesh, it is considered to be holy. So what do we mean that it doesn't have the kedusha of the Azara? And the Gemara says to that, midrabon, and the Gemara says that kedusha is just the rabon, it's not kedusha on a doraisa level. But the Gemara continues and asks, Udoraisa lo, is that really true? Is it not kadosh? Does it not have that holiness on a doraisa level? V'atanya, but we learned in a brisa. Lishkos benuyos bechol psuchos lakodesh. If you have chambers that are built in the mundane area and they open up into the holy area, minayin shakohanim nichnasin l'sham. From where do we know that the kohanim can enter there? V'yochlin sham kachei kachim, and they can eat over there kachei kachim. Ushiyari mincha, they can eat over there the remainder of the mincha. Talmud lomar b'chatzar oel moed yochlu. It says in the pasuk they're eaten in the Chatzar Ol Moed, the courtyard of the Ol Moed. HaTorah ribsa chatzeros harbe etzel achila achas. The Torah says many chatzeros are included in terms of this eating. And the Gemara continues and says, Amar Rava says, La'achila shani, that's in terms of eating, that's different. There again, we do have that inclusion of Chatzeros Harbe. But the Gemara continues, Avolinyan Tumah lo, but it's really true that it's not as far as Tumah. It's not considered to have the Kedusha in terms of Tumah. V'atanya, but we learned in a Brisa. Lishkos habenuyos l'chol psuchos lakodesh. Again, you have these chambers that are built in the mundane area that open up into the holy area. Kohanim nichnasin l'sham va'ochlin sham kachei kachim. The Kohanim can enter there and eat kachei kachim. V'en shochten sham kachim kalim. Now they're not allowed to slaughter there kachim kalim. V'chayavin misham tumah, and there is a liability in terms of tumah. And the Gemara says to that, Lava Amrit Ein Shochten. Well, didn't it just say that you're not allowed to slaughter Kachim Kalim? Why should Kachim Kalim be different? Clearly, there is something going on. So Tani Nami. So therefore, since it says, or just like it says, you can't slaughter the Kachim Kalim, Tani Nami Ein Chayavin. It should have said Ein Chayavin. There's no liability of Tumah, and you should change the text. It doesn't mean there's a liability because of Tumah. It means there's no liability because of Tumah. But the Gemara continues and says, Bishlama Ein Shochten. But 1 second, when it comes to the not slaughtering of Kachim Kalim, that actually we can understand, because there's a specific halacha, bo'ina keneged hapesach veleka. There's a halacha that has to be slaughtered opposite, corresponding to the entryway of the Beis Hamikdash, of the Heichal, and that you don't have in these chambers. Ela ein chayavin amai. But if you're going to say there's no liability of tumah, why should that be true? But the Gemara continues and says, "V'lataymich." But according to your reasoning, ein shochten, where it says again you're not allowed to slaughter. Milo askinon diika shchita keneged hapesach. Aren't we talking about a situation where there is at least the potential of slaughtering corresponding to the Pesach? There is, even in a situation where you'd be in a chamber where it is corresponding to an entranceway. Apparently, it's ein shochten. Diilek olamai yitzrich. Because if there was no Pesach over here, so then why do we even need to teach it? Obviously, we're teaching some kind of chiddush, some type of insight that you're not allowed to slaughter in these areas, even if there is a Pesach. Rather, it means even though you are slaughtering opposite a Pesach, opposite an entrance, Tani ein shochten mishum de lo kaddish. But still, it says that you're not allowed to slaughter because it does lack that kedusha. So therefore, again, Tani nami ein chayavin. We'll say also there's no liability in terms of tumah. And the Gemara continues and asks, Now the implication of the entire above discussion is there is no requirement of opposite the entrance of the Heichal. There is no such requirement in terms of the Achila, in terms of the eating of Kachei Kachim. That seems to be only a requirement by the slaughtering of the Kachim Kalim. Is that really true? V'hatanya, but we learned in a brayser, Rav Yossi Rav Yehuda Omer. Rav Yossi Rav Yehuda says, Shnei Pishpishin Hayu Beveis HaChalifos. We quoted this earlier. There were two openings by the Beis HaChalifos that were opposite the Beis HaChalifos, which was the chamber of knives. Govan Shmona, they had a height of 8. Kedei lahachsher eswa azara la'achilas Kachei Kachim v'lishchitas Kachim Kalim. Why did you need these openings? You needed these openings in that area in order to render that area of the Azara fit for the eating of Kachei Kachim and for the slaughtering of Kachim Kalim. And again, we mentioned this earlier. The idea was that these openings, they served as a way of considering it Keneged HaPesach, that therefore it's considered to be a part of the Azara that you can slaughter Kachim Kalim and apparently eat Kachei Kachim as well. That also needs to be Keneged HaPesach. And the Gemara says to that, Amar Ravina says, Sami mikan achila, just remove achila from this brayse. It really is just talking about the slaughtering of Kachim Kalim. It's not talking about the eating of the Kachei Kachim. The Gemara continues and says, Vaksib, but isn't it written in the Pasuk, and this is a Pasuk in Sefer Vayikra by the inauguration of the Mishkan, it says, Bashlas habasar Pesach ol moed. It says, cook the meat at the entrance of the ol moed, Visham tochlu also, and that's the area where you're going to eat it. It seems that you do need Keneged HaPesach by the eating. And the Gemara says to that, Kachei Shah Shani, there we're talking about Kachei Shah, meaning it was just karbanos that were brought only at that time for the inauguration of the Mishkan. So there it's different. There are different requirements that would not apply in general by the eating of Kachei Kachim. And Rashi explains, Hachi Garsinon, this is the proper text, Tani Tana Kami de Rav Nachman, the Tana taught before Rav Nachman, Kol HaAzara Haisa Orech, Kuf Pei Zayin Al Rochav Kuf Lamed Hey, the entire Azara was a length of 187 amos by a width of 135. Amar lei satem hachi amar li'aba. This is what father said to me. V'ochlin sham kachei kachim, and one can eat over there kachei kachim. Again, that's in the entire area of the Azara. Dahachi hu to have a kedusha b'kedushas chatzer ol moed. That's considered the kedusha of the chatzer of the ol moed of the Azara. Lachilas kachei kachim, in terms of the eating of kachei kachim. Utvei mehachi lo kaddish, and beyond that there is no kedusha. You don't have that kedusha's Azara. V'uchalol kol ha'azara, and it means the entire area of the Azara. Uvisocho heichol v'ulam uveis kachei kadashim, and that includes everything. It includes the heichol, the ulam, the kachei kadashim. V'hatol achori beis hakaporos. The tah was the room behind the area of the kodesh kadashim of the beis hakaporos. V'yod alef ama avir me'achorav, and then the 11 amos of airspace after that was part of the chatzar, that was part of the Azara. V'shochten sham kachim kalim garsinon, and then the proper text is that in the area of the Azara they slaughter kachim kalim. V'chayav and all of mishum tumah. And again, there also, if a person enters tameh, there's a liability. And the Gemara said, what is it coming to exclude? If you're going to say hachalonos, it excludes the windows. Ove chalal hachalonos, meaning again that space of the windows. Shebechomos hazara, essentially within the wall space of the hazara, within the wall, saviv mibifnim, that surrounds it. V'ove hachoma berosh lamala, and also let's say the thickness of the wall at the top. But that can't be, because Tanina, we learned in a Mishnah, this is from Psachim, the Kadisha, that in fact those do have the Kedusha. V'hechi matzi l'mutinu, so how could we exclude them? And Rashi continues, Hachi Garsin, and this is the proper text, Ela l'mu'ute lishkos, rather it's to exclude the lishkos, the chambers. But the Gemara said, Ida benuyos b'chol u'psuchos l'kodesh, if they're built in the mundane area, but they open into the holy area. We'll take a look at the Shinuya Nuschos, l'kodesh v'anon tanan, the Mishnah, the Gemara then asked, but didn't we learn in the Mishnah, this is a Mishnah in Meiser Sheni, that Tochon Kodesh, that those are considered to be Kodesh, those are not excluded. And then the Gemara suggested, no, that's just midrabbanan, they're just holy on a drabbanan level. But then the Gemara said, Udoraisa lo, but are they not holy on a Doraisa level? V'hatanya, but we learned in a Braisa, minayin l'lishkos habenuyos b'chol u'psuchos l'kodesh ha'kohanim. And now Rashi continues, from where do we know the Braisa says, sha'kohanim nichnasen l'sham v'ochlin sham kachei kachim v'shari mincha. How do you know that they can eat kachei kachim there? Talmud lomer b'chatzar oel moed. It says b'chatzar oel moed. It seems like on a Doraisa level they have kedusha. V'lo garsinon v'shochten sham kachim kalim. Rashi notes we don't have the girsa over here of they slaughtered over their kachim kalim hacha. That's not a proper girsa here in this brisa. V'gam shar loshan hakasa b'svarm shibashu. The other parts of the loshan that are written in svarm is also mistake, says Rashi. And Rashi continues, Ho'anon tanan tochen kodesh, but we learned in the Mishnah, again in Meiser Sheni, these Rashis are out of order, but the point is we learned that they are kodesh, v'lechayev alayim mishum tumah, and therefore there should be a liability of tumah. And again, as we said, the Gemara then said midrabanan, that's only midrabanan. Mitzvahs chachamim mishaloi konsul hen betumah. It's a drabanan not to enter their betumah. Aval kares v'karban leka, but there's no kares, there's no carbon. V'hatanya minayin l'lishkos, and then the Gemara said, but didn't we learn in a brisa? How do we know the lishkos midmar binan l'hu l'inyan achila? And once we're saying you can eat there, the kachei kachim, shmami no kiddush shasam hein minator, doesn't that show a holiness at Doraisa level? Deimi drabanan ukras machtu, if it's just a drabanan, the pasuk is just an asmachta. Hey kilu chachamim lak or davar, how could the chachamim be so lenient and uproot something Doraisa? Ulahachshir makom chol achilas kachei kachim, would they allow an area that's chol that a person could eat kachei kachim there? And then the Gemara said, well, when it comes to eating chatzeros harbe, the Torah includes many chatzeros b'makom kadosh b'chatzeros from the pasuk we learned that we can include these areas as well. La'achila shani, when it comes to eating, it's different. Du Rabbi Bakra chatzeros harvi. Again, there we have an inclusion for many chatzeros. V'in shochten sham kachim kalim, and then the Gemara said you can't slaughter over there kachim kalim. Why is that different? To haba'inon lifneo al moed. Again, you need lifneo al moed keneged hapesach lemuute tzidei tzad, and this was mentioned earlier where we exclude the sides of the sides. Lav amr, didn't you say the katani ba'in shochten? The Gemara suggested you already said you can't slaughter kachim kalim over there, so almalav kadishi, so you see it doesn't have kedusha. So tani nami ein chayavin mishum tuma. So say again, we're including the eating of kachei kachim, but we're not including anything else. There would be no liability in terms of tuma. But then the Gemara said milo askinon deika shchita keneged hapesach. But aren't we talking where it's possible to slaughter in these chambers, even corresponding to the entrance? Kishaya pischo mechuvan keneged pischei besach alifos. Let's say, for example, the opening of the chamber was directly corresponding to the opening by the Beis HaChalifos, again the chamber of knives, and still we're saying that it lacks the Kedusha. And then the Gemara said Kachei Shah Shani. The Gemara said in terms of eating of Kachei Kachim, it seems like there is a requirement of Keneged HaPesach, but the Gemara said Kachei Shah, that if it was just a momentary type of carbon, it's different. Gezeres HaKasav Haisa b'Miluim, that was a Gezeres HaKasav there by the Miluim. Again, the Miluim is the inauguration of the Mishkan. Aval Kachei Doros, it's Rabu, but when it comes to Kachei Doros, so then already it's included. Kedamar HaTorah Ribsa Chatzeros Harbi, the Torah includes many Chatzeros, and you don't have that requirement of Keneged HaPesach. And the Gemara continues at the Tudat. Samar Rav Yitzchak bar Avudimi, Rav Yitzchak bar Avudimi says, Minayin ledom shenifsal b'shkias hachama, from where we know that blood is disqualified once the sun sets. This is talking about a carbon. The animal is slaughtered, now you have the blood, you have to apply the blood to the Mizbeach, but once the sun sets, it's too late. You can no longer apply that blood to the Mizbeach. How do we know that? Shenemar, as it says in the Pasuk in Sefer Vayikra. B'yom hakrivo as zivcho ye'achel, on the day of the offering, it should be eaten. It means b'yom she'ata zoveach, it means on the day that you sacrifice, that you slaughter, ata makriv, that's the day that you offer. B'yom she'iyata zoveach, but if it's not the day that you slaughtered it, iyata makriv, you can't offer. But the Gemara continues, Haimi boile, but isn't this pasuk needed for? And Rashi explains, B'yom she'ata zoveach ata makriv, b'yom she'iyata zoveach iyata makriv. The offering is brought on the day of slaughtering, not on the day when it wasn't slaughtered. Hachi garsinan la bekula sugya kach matzasi muga, that's the proper text. V'hachi perusha, and this is the explanation. B'yom hakrivo azivcho, it says on the day of offering. Shetei hakrava uzvicha b'yom echad, it means that the offering and the slaughtering is on the same day. V'lo mahanyule halona barosh hamizbeach la'achshure l'zrika l'machra. You wouldn't be able to, let's say, put it on the top of the mizbeach overnight and then do the zrika the next day. That would not be allowed, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Vav Amid Beis.